I talk to a lot of Bitcoin traders and folks that seem to have a very good pulse and touch on this market. I don't say that I do because I don't really look at it every day. But they seem to think that this thing is on a death march to 100K. I'm not sure whether that price is realistic or not in a year, but I will say that we're going to get to a tipping point where everybody really talks about this. I still don't think we're there yet. I think we're just at the beginning. But when you see the inflows into these ETFs, J-Cal, it's like a very big deal because it just allows every mom and pop individual to buy some to the extent that they want to own it or they want to speculate on it, whatever it is. So I think it's been a very big year. And I think that psychologically, it's proven a lot of folks wrong. And it's a setup for something really constructive.
Billionaire Chamath Palihapitiya is an OG when it comes to Bitcoin. First investing when Bitcoin was just $80 per coin, he claims that at one point in its history, he owned over 5% of the entire Bitcoin supply. In their latest All-In podcast, Chamath gave a breakdown on Bitcoin post-halving, and he showed off what could be one of the most important charts crypto investors need to know. By just analyzing the previous Bitcoin cycles, you can see that 1 to 3 months after the halving, the Bitcoin price hasn't done much. But then 12 to 18 months following the halving and the Bitcoin price has ripped higher. By just taking the average of the last 2 cycles, Chamath and his team projects that we could see a $1.1 million Bitcoin by October of 2025. Also guys, before we jump into the video, only a small percentage of my viewers are actually subscribed. If you enjoy finance content, consider subscribing or liking the video. It's free and you can always change your mind. But without further ado, let's jump in with Chamath.
And so if you apply the averages, and again, these are just averages, they're by no means predictions. Okay, so I just want to qualify that.
Yeah,
this
is not financial advice.
It's not financial advice. These are just guesses.
Data.
We took these and we applied it to the price of Bitcoin. And if you go to the next page, you start to see what could happen if you just take the average of the last few cycles. So because the first cycle was so extreme, and you start to
so you're just doing cycle 2 and 3 here, to be clear.
Just the averages of cycle 2 and 3, and what you start to see is some really meaningful appreciation. I thought it would be good to talk about crypto for a couple of reasons. One is because we just had the halving at the end of April.
When did that happen?
The halving is where, just for folks that don't know, the way that Bitcoins are created is by solving these complex mathematical algorithms that take a lot of time and energy and money. And when you solve it, you get rewarded with some number of Bitcoin. And roughly every 4 years, that reward gets cut in half. It's called a halving. And this week, I saw somebody who reminded me all of this. And I just want to give this guy a proper shout out. So his name is Wences Casares. And Wences in Silicon Valley, I would say, really was agent zero of Bitcoin. He was the one in 2010 that introduced it to me. I remember he reminded me of the story, actually. We were at Oren's Hummus, and he's like, he's Argentinian, he's a great, so I'm going to try to copy his accent. Chamath, you need to buy the Bitcoin. So I heard the story. I fell in love with it. I remember I called my family office. I'm like, buy me 1 million of these things. And he was like, or $1 million worth. And he was like, are you crazy? And I was like, no, there's just a little appetizer. We'll get to the main course. Anyways, he has done a phenomenal job of understanding and proselytizing Bitcoin. And I want to thank him because he really put me onto this. But he mentioned something to me when I saw him a couple of days ago, which is you should really look at the pattern of Bitcoin after a halving. And so I was really curious. And so I had a guy on my team, Quentin, put this together. So Nick, let's go to the first page. So why is this interesting? So here's a little Bitcoin price analysis for you guys. So there's been a couple of halving cycles that have happened. And I asked him to go back and look at the price performance 1 month after a halving, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and 18 months after a halving. And what you notice is that there are these moments initially where essentially when you go through a Bitcoin halving, people are sort of reassessing what's happening and they're trying to figure it out. That's sort of what I would say happens in the first month and roughly what also happens in the first 3 months. But then within 6 months to a year and 18 months of these things, there are these crazy price appreciation cycles that happen. So that's what this page shows, which is, 18 months after the first halving, the Bitcoin price returned 45x. After the second halving, it returned almost 28x. And after this third halving, it returned almost an 8x, which is really incredible returns in such a short period of time. If you go to the next page. And so if you graph that, this is what it starts to show, which is what is this price performance after each of these halving cycles. Now, why is that interesting? Well, it's interesting because on top of this halving, which theoretically, if history is a guide, we should see some price appreciation. Obviously, the other thing that's happened is we've commercialized Bitcoin. And we talked about this sort of as my big prediction for 2024, which is these ETFs are really going to allow Bitcoin to cross the chasm and have its sort of central key moment, right? And so if you apply the averages, and again, these are just averages, they're by no means predictions. Okay, so I just want to qualify that.
Yeah,
This
is not financial advice.
It's not financial advice. These are just guesses.
Data.
We took these and we applied it to the price of Bitcoin. And if you go to the next page, you start to see what could happen if you just take the average of the last few cycles. So because the first cycle was so extreme, and you start to
so you're just doing cycle 2 and 3 here, to be clear.
Just the averages of cycle 2 and 3, and what you start to see is some really meaningful appreciation. And when I talked to Wences about this, how he explained it, which makes a lot of sense to me, is there are a lot of countries that will never look at Bitcoin credibly, even if they support it. The US may be one of those, but there's an increasing body of countries that will become dual currency. And they will look at their local currency, and then they will look at Bitcoin. And they will say both of these two things are needed. One, when you're transacting on a daily basis for random goods and services. And two, when you need to buy a permanent asset that needs to have residual value, you'll use something like BTC. And I think that's a very powerful concept. And if you look at what this price chart could indicate, is that if this thing starts to get to these levels of appreciation, it is going to completely replace gold and start to become something that has transactional utility for hard assets. And I think if you marry that with this worry that some folks have about dollar debasement, you start to see some really interesting opportunities. So I just thought that this was a interesting thing that he here's our disclaimer, interesting thing that he put me on. I thought I'd share that with you. I'll publish this on Twitter, but that's your crypto corner for the year, folks.
I think it's really interesting how the crypto community is getting organized into basically a lobby to advocate for its interests, because
it's the biggest lobby in America. Did you know that?
Yeah, they've been so targeted over the last few years because Gensler and Warren have been on a crusade to basically make crypto illegal or drive it offshore. Well, every action has a equal and opposite reaction. And now the crypto people have basically had a political awakening and realized they have to get involved in the political system just as a matter of defense, self-defense.
Shout out SBF. He was a pioneer.
Well, not like that. I mean, that guy
he was dropping money on everybody,
Did you guys hear this? Did you hear this rumor that
he was doing that to basically push for regulatory capture? Remember?
Yeah. I think it's
this is
nuanced
different.
point.
Did you guys hear this rumor? Did you guys hear this rumor that SBF was going to put $1 billion into the election and convince Tom Brady to run as a Republican?
And give the $1 billion to Trump.
Oh, sorry, give the $1 billion to Trump.
He was going to give Trump $1 billion to not run.
Okay.
And then get Tom Brady to run. I mean, this person had delusions of grandeur. He thought he was a Jedi Knight, and he's like literally in Jabba's palace right now. I don't know what a lunatic he was. I mean, talk about delusions of grandeur, Sachs. This guy thought he would just drop $1 billion and convince somebody not to run for government. I think we're gonna get a regulatory, back to the young people we talked about in the previous story. I think the reason they're attracted to crypto is because it doesn't have government control. And since if you don't trust the government and you see the government over and over and over again cover things up or the grift or make decisions that are not in your generation's best interest, why wouldn't you opt out of their financial system? And you know what? There's a lot of them, and they're getting organized. To your point, Sachs, I think we're going to have a crypto framework, and it's worth probably 5 points in this election. What do you think, Sachs? How many points is being the pro-crypto candidate worth in this election? 1, 2, 3 points of votes? 4 points? It's got to be some significant.
It's hard to
if young
quantify,
people show up, it could be 500 basis points. I mean, young people do not show up to vote because there isn't an issue that they care about.
Correct.
But there's 50 million Americans that own crypto. 50.
Okay, so if 10% of them are, like, let's say that's their single issue, that's 5 million votes.
No. There's a plausible case where 40 million of those folks show up, because you're talking about a structural part of their wealth creation, right? So, for example, like, President Biden talked about giving people a head start by eliminating their debt. That's a narrow issue. And the reason it's a narrow issue, there's just as many people that don't have debt and just as many people that paid off their debt. And it creates a lot of haves and have-nots, right? And there's all these rules around who will get the debt relief, et cetera. You end up touching 4 or 5 million people maximum. But if there are 50 million people who have now decided to have at least a hedge against the establishment and the traditional financial system, and you are threatening to take that wealth away, I could see how 80% of those folks show up to the ballot box and say, all right, which one of you will just leave me alone? And if the answer is President Trump, then they're all going to vote for President Trump.
I think this is like such a great issue for political candidates to embrace. And it's just such a simple framework. I've said it a dozen times. Create a sophisticated investor test. Let 1,000 flowers bloom. People can make whatever crypto projects they want. But to buy it, you just have to take a simple test like a driver's license so that you don't risk your entire net worth or whatever. If you do, you're an informed buyer of crypto. Just make a sophisticated investor test and let's move on. Chamath, just since we're in Crypto Corner, before we leave Crypto Corner, when is my ape going to be worth money again? When will my ape go back up?
Never.
Okay, so my ape's not coming back. Okay, so I guess I shouldn't have done that.
So there's Chamath Palihapitiya's insights into Bitcoin's post-halving performances. His charts offer a fascinating glimpse into the potential future of this revolutionary asset, with projections of Bitcoin reaching $500,000 by October 25 up to $1.1 million. Understanding these cycles will be crucial for any crypto investor. Now guys, if you are watching this video, you're clearly interested in crypto. If you want to stay most up to date on the crypto and Bitcoin world, make sure to subscribe to my daily 5-minute crypto newsletter. It gives the latest expert predictions, any breaking news, and top on-chain analysis all in a nutshell. Click the first link in the description to join over 60,000 others in becoming a better crypto investor right now. Anyway guys, that's all for today's video. I hope it did bring you some value. I'll see you all in the next one, and as always, all the best.